Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? So I have another story for you. This one is not as sweet, but it is important. Derek Black's dad started the website Stormfront. Has anybody ever here ever heard of Stormfront? It was the first white supremacist website on the internet. And it is still there. Derek, as a child, had a neo-Nazi radio show and a kids page on his dad's racist website. He was the heir apparent to his dad's racist online empire. But when Derek went to college, he wasn't public about his affiliation with his father's website. But it still soon got out that he was, in fact, the young mouthpiece for the white nationalist movement. Many people in the college shunned him, and in his own words, he wrote in a student forum, "I've done my best since arriving to New College to stay out of people's hair. I have always weighed whether I want to attend a public lecture for fear of the glares, and a couple of club leaders have expressed that they'd prefer I not attend their meetings, including the Pluralism Committee. During my first semester back, I would go sailing to escape the occasional middle finger in the library, the murmurs when I'd get food and ham, and the occasional threatening emails." He had been ostracized for his beliefs, and many might say rightfully so. But a Jewish student, an Orthodox Jewish student, Matthew Stevenson, who lived a floor below Derek, took a different approach. "Hey," he texted, "what are you doing Friday night?" Kindness is courageous. In his book, Deep Kindness, Houston Kraft tells us the kind of kindness the world needs is the vulnerable understanding that kindness will almost always cost us our comfort and usually our convenience. Matthew Stevenson was an ordinary guy, as ordinary Jody. And Jody may say she's not ordinary, but you know. But when he invited Derek Black, the white nationalist, to join his Shabbat dinner, he acted with extreme courage and vulnerability. In his 2019 interview with Krista Tippett on the podcast On Being, Stevenson said, "At the time, I had been hosting these Shabbat dinners in my dorm room every Friday night, doing this with my close friend Moshe Ash, and we spoke about it and decided that there was an opportunity. We knew that Derek had grown up in a white nationalist family, amongst white nationalist royalty, so to speak, and probably didn't know any people from the backgrounds that his ideology despised. So for that reason," he said, "I decided, along with Moshe, to invite Derek to come." In some ways, it's easy to practice random acts of kindness, to buy that latte for the person behind you in the Starbucks line. I always feel good when I get that, right? Like it feels pretty good. It's easy to hold the door open for the person behind you. But Houston Kraft calls these types of kindnesses common kindnesses. These types of kindnesses, they're not changing the world maybe. They keep the gears running, but sometimes they do fail to acknowledge the bigger, broken machine. What Stevenson did was a deep kindness, which Kraft defines as the kind of kindness that overcomes selfishness and fear. That is the kind of kindness that can ripple throughout a community and bend the arc of the moral universe closer to justice. Kindness is clear. When recounting the story to Krista Tippett, Stevenson recalls, "I remember the first time that Derek was invited over. I was very explicit with people that this was not ambush Derek time. Sometimes we confuse nice and kind. Many of us who are acculturated into indirect communication styles, we think we're being kind when we're really being nice. And by nice, I mean we're avoiding difficult topics or difficult decisions to keep the peace. As Brene Brown points out in her essay on her website, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. When we are clear, we make space to have hard conversations with courage and compassion. This is not like clear as in, I got a lot of problems with you people. That's not the clear we're talking about. When we're kind and clear, we share our truths with an open heart, and we listen more than we speak. And this is a hard one for us people pleasers, because it means saying no as a complete sentence when we don't have capacity. It means not being kind just so that people will think we're kind, but meanwhile we're drowning in burnout because we're not meeting our own needs. With Derek and Matthew and the Shabbat dinner guests, it meant being clear with those in attendance about how the evening would progress and sharing stories instead of politics. They didn't spend time at their Shabbat dinners trying to convince each other of their points of view. Instead, they chatted about shared interests. Kindness is a skill. As I was rereading Derek and Matthew's story, I began to think about when was the last time I invited a friend over for dinner? It's been a long time. And maybe you have people over for dinner every week, I don't know, but I think that we can all agree, and the research does show that we are more isolated now than ever, and more anxious now than ever. And if you want to find out more about that, you can read Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation or Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, and you'll find all the statistics you need on loneliness and anxiety in our current culture. But let's have some real talk for a minute. The care emoji, that's not deep kindness. Timothy Snyder, in his book On Tyranny, says, for the resistance to succeed, two boundaries must be crossed. First, ideas about change must engage people of various backgrounds who do not agree about everything. Second, people must find themselves in places that are not their homes and among groups who were not previously their friends. Tyrants, dictators, oligarchs, they want us to be isolated. They want us sitting behind our screens and imagining that each of us live this beautifully curated life. They want us to judge each other with likes and reposts while we remain apathetic to the suffering of our neighbors, of our kids, of our grandparents. This is why Matthew Stevenson's invite to Derek Black was so revolutionary. His deep kindness extended to all those he was inviting to share a meal together. He was challenging them very gently, very kindly, to collectively, on all sides, move out of their comfort zones. Not to have a political debate, but to be in company and conversation with each other. They practiced together the skill of kindness, and over time, they developed that skill more deeply. And you can practice the skill of kindness too, knowing that just like anything, you might be awkward and less confident at first, but the more you do it, the easier it will become. And kindness is connective. A few weeks ago at Cedar Lane, the children made 160 care bags for federal workers. We are 2.5 miles away from NIH, and our community has been absolutely devastated by the cuts to the federal government, and particularly to NIH. The kids wrote the sweetest notes and messages on the bags, and they wrote cards, and we put them inside the bags along with some candy and fidgets and other items. And they wrote things like, "Thank you for your expertise," and "You are worthy." And we didn't really prompt them as to what to write, but this was something that was very dear to them in their own community. And they were able to kind of get out some of those feelings and emotions through this process. Then members of the congregation passed out the bags at the medical center Metro as we sang old school labor songs, which is my favorite. And later, a congregant shared with me a post on Reddit with a picture of the bags that said, "Heartwarming songs and gifts of support at Medical Center Metro. This morning, a group of from the UU Cedar Lane Church sang songs and gave bags to support federal workers at the Medical Center Metro. The bags and the cards inside the bags had loving messages written by the children. This was such a nice surprise." Wow, it made it all the way to Reddit. Another congregant told me she went to a USAID workers organizing meeting, and someone there, completely unconnected to the congregation, had several of the bags and was sharing the goodies with everyone. One act of deep and courageous kindness can ripple out into the world and connect us to each other. It is, in fact, true that we are all part of an interdependent web. Kindness is rooted in our theology. Deep kindness, the kind of kindness that is real and rich and dark, fertile soil kindness, invites us to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In order to embody our first principle, we must engage our imagination. It's so easy to write someone off when we label them as right-wing or white supremacist, as so many of Derek Black's classmates did. But when we imagine that there is good in someone, even when it's incredibly hard, then we can live into our first principle. And I will be the first to tell you that our first principle is, for me, the most challenging to live into. And our first principle is the one that most clearly invites us into deep, deep kindness. And that does not mean that we have to accept abuse or turn the other cheek in the name of kindness. Absolutely not. Our first kindness has to be to ourselves. Our kindness can have clear boundaries because we know clear is kind. Thank you. I want to make sure you're still awake up there. At the same time, as shown by Matthew and Derek, when we imagine a different way forward, new horizons and new possibilities open up. Derek and Matthew forged a 2-year friendship that lasted through college. Derek continued to go to Shabbat dinners every Friday night, and he denounced white nationalism. He wrote in 2013, "I acknowledge that the things I have said, as well as many of my actions, have been harmful to people of color, people of Jewish descent, activists striving for opportunity and fairness for all, and others affected. It was not my intention then, and I will not contribute to any cause that perpetuates this harm in the future." Who would have imagined that the son of the leader of Stormfront would write those words? Kindness allows us to imagine another way and to get out of our silos. And finally, kindness is the antidote to tyranny. Timothy Snyder implores us to make eye contact and small talk. He says, people living in fear of repression remember how their neighbors treated them. A smile, a handshake, a word of greeting, banal gestures in normal situations took on great significance. When friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, he says, looked the other way or crossed the street to avoid eye contact, fear grew. He adds, if you affirm everyone, you can be sure that certain people will feel better. Now, I've heard it said that part of Obama's magic is that he treated the cook the same way he treated the queen. And personally, my uncle was a school janitor, my grandmother a school secretary back when they called them school secretaries, and my dad was a baggage handler for an airline until he retired a few years ago. These are often thankless and invisible jobs. When we greet people, no matter their social location, we are practicing those common kindnesses. We let people know they are seen, and that if they disappeared, they would be missed. As people like our Maryland neighbor, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, are being swept up and essentially disappeared for nothing more than having tattoos, letting people know that you see them, that you see their humanity, is an act of resistance against tyranny. So I will leave you with the words of the Reverend Anna Bladel from the website Infleshed. When our prayer, as it so often is right now, when our prayer is, what the actual F? The answer to the prayer is, whatever sphere of influence you have, use it. Witness and name what others seek to ignore and normalize. Refuse capitulation, fear, and threat. Resist dehumanization, a vicious cycle which trades life for lives and will always fail to honor the sacredness of each life a demand for protection, nourishment, survival, which is to say, practice love, and I will add, practice kindness. Tend life force, enflesh care, fierce and tender, cultivate courage, root in collective movement, find your people, organize, and access the power that comes only by coming together as we are right now. This is what prayer looks like. This is what prayer looks like. This is what prayer looks like. This is how God moves. This is how salvation comes. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.